Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Blurred Lines, Crime, Conspiracy, and the Truth Behind the Gossip. I'm your host, Ashtootrippy. You can also call me Ash, Ashley. It's fine to call me Trippy as well. I do apologize for missing the episode last week. I really had an anticipation to do one, but I really wasn't into any kind of true crime things last week, honestly. And the only way that I can really deep dive into something is when something like strikes me and I'm like, okay, I need to look into that, you know? And for people that know, they know. And again, since I'm just building this up, since this is still so new and I don't monetize on it, it's hard for me to take the time away from things that I actually, monetize from. But I love doing this. I love talking. It's something more to talk about and to sit here and have a conversation and bring awareness to other things aside from what I do on social media. So if you guys don't already follow me, you can follow me on all my social media platforms. You can find me on YouTube, Ashtootrippy. You can find me on TikTok, Ashtootrippy, as well as on Instagram. You got that right, Ashtootrippy. Also, the podcast has a TikTok account that is Blurred Lines Podcast, and I am trying to stay up to date with it, but I'm going to admit it's really hard. I've ventured into other things on TikTok, and it's just, I'm trying to keep it all together. So bear with me on that portion so we can have a little bit of conversations over there, but you guys can always go to any of my social medias. On my main page, Ashtootrippy, I do talk about true crime, conspiracy theories, and gossip still, so you guys will have the same experience kind of as here as there, a little bit more gossip. I don't really talk about gossip too much here unless it intertwines with true crime, but I wanted to kind of do a couple of things here. So again, we do have episodes every Friday. I'm going to try to keep you guys as updated as possible when I don't have episodes. So that's why I'm saying follow my social media accounts. Even if you guys don't check social media too often, just follow them if you're wondering where I'm at, okay? Kind of helps me so I don't have to upload and stuff like that. You can get a little bit more personable on there. I do go live on TikTok almost every day, Monday through Friday in the morning. So yeah, and I just wanted to put this out there. I am still looking for somebody to create me some music. Of course, you will get credit eventually once I get you guys to do a little bit more for me on this podcast. I will be able to pay you, but right now it will just be that credit. I will also be using some of that music like in my TikToks as well. So if anybody is interested, please send me a DM on any social media platform, or you can send me an email, ashtootrippy@gmail.com, and I will get back to you, and I will appreciate you forever because I really need that. I think it brings everything together. But let's get to it today, guys. Now, I want to give a fair warning on this episode, okay? This episode is very hard. This episode I think it needs to be told for awareness for parents of teenagers, for awareness of people that just don't see this and don't believe that this is happening. It is happening. It is current, and it does involve children. We're going to be talking about children. It's usually between the ages of around 8 or 9 to 17-year-olds, and this is going to have talk of self-mutilation, suicide, and things like that. So CSAM, child pornography, things like that. So if you guys have any kind of triggers or sensitivity to any of those things, or even like animal mutilation, anything that is extremely horrific that the deepest parts of anybody's psyche can even grasp, I would not recommend you listen to this episode. But I do recommend, if you have children that play Roblox, Fortnite, they have access to any kind of device, they have a Discord channel, anything like that, I do encourage you guys to listen to this, because I think that if we're aware of it, this is something that can stop, and it's something that can potentially turn into something that I don't think the United States or America, the world, has seen until now. And that's not giving it any clout or glory. That's just the way it is. And if you guys haven't figured out what I'm talking about yet, this is the 764 network. We're going to go into the abyss, and we're going to talk about the rise and the reach of the 764 network and what exactly it is, what people are doing, what the FBI, all these countries are banding together for this to protect our children. And we're going to talk about it here. Now, I watched quite a few, and I will leave everything that I watched in the show notes down below. But I watched quite a few, not only YouTube videos on this, but I also watched a few like CBS documentaries and things like that. And let me tell you, completely broke my heart because, you know, when you're a teenager, you know, when you put yourself in that teenager mentality, which when I was a teenager, I was going through a lot when I was a teenager. I had a severe anxiety disorder, and I was secluded a lot of my life, and I was a very depressed teenager. You know, that's just how it was. I had a childhood trauma from my father, and divorce and abandonment issues and all this other stuff. So, you know, being a teenager in itself is not easy, but now teenagers have access to the internet, to things that can potentially, you know, harm them, to people that don't have the interests in them like other people or their family or their loved ones. I can see it happening very rapidly, and I can see, you know, these minds being molded into something that it should have never ever even started with. So it's crazy to think this. This is just terrifying. These are the terrifying corners of the internet. This is 764, a decentralized neo-Nazi satanic sextortion network targeting children. It started as grooming on a Discord, Telegram, or even Roblox, and it's mutated into global violence. You can't shake off the horrors once you hear these details. So again, I want to preface this by saying, guys, that this is a heavy trigger warning on this episode, because there's a lot that we're going to talk about that I know personally did trigger me a little bit, I'm not gonna lie, but I think that it's still important, especially for those parents out there. Basically, the way this group started, it started in 2021 in Stephenville, Texas, and basically that was the zip code in the area, or is the zip code in the area. And this was started by a 15-year-old Bradley Cadenhead. He was later imprisoned for a lot of charges, and not only starting this but continuing it. Now, to my understanding, this Bradley Cadenhead, he was essentially the start of the Discord channel where a lot of these kids got together, and we'll get into how that kind of went around. But that was the main person. It was a 15-year-old in his home, in his room, that created this horrendous cult. What this cult does is, there's these dark corners of the internet where, you know, I don't want to say just children, but sick individuals are into watching gore videos, blood videos, people cutting themselves, even animal torture videos, things like that. These are parts of the internet that people don't see unless they're looking for. You get what I mean? So a lot of these people, what they will do is they will go into like a Roblox server, or even Fortnite, or anywhere that children are playing games. I even seen in some of these documentaries that they even like did SoundCloud profiles and all the like just crazy stuff you wouldn't even think of, right? And basically they go in and they talk to these children, and they get a sense of their vulnerabilities. And once these children start talking to them more, is what they end up doing is they invite them to a server, which is usually off of Telegram, which they'll tell them to download, or they'll do it off of Discord, which a lot of teenagers have Discord nowadays. Discord is basically a space where you can either create your own chat channel with your own buddies, you can also do video games and stream and do a bunch of other stuff. So it's used in a lot of different aspects, but the biggest aspect is is gaming and is targeting children. So once they are in these groups are basically made to, I guess you can say, appease and fascinate these teenagers that are into gore, or, you know, take the horror genre a little bit too far. They kind of desensitize them to that. So you're seeing these videos on repeat and they're getting talked about. Not only that, there's also lives that are in these discords and or telegrams that are basically depicting suicide, and not depicting but actually doing it. We'll get into that in a little bit. But basically they get them in there, they're desensitized, they start playing on their emotions. They'll usually, before they're in there, they'll have them take explicit photos or do something that would later shame, kind of in a blackmail form. And then what would happen is they would be in these groups, and the first thing that they would do is tell this young teenager, young child, to carve their username into them. So there was a lot of people that had different usernames, and that's how they would like mark. And this is allegedly came from a different Discord group that Bradley had actually got this from, is because it was like his trophy. Some other guy in another group, cult like this, Satanic, neo-Nazi type shit, and he was like, well, this is mine, so I'm gonna brand it. So that's what they would do, is they would make them go live and they would cut the usernames into their skin. Very disturbing stuff. There's instances of them encouraging children to kill themselves. They seen pictures of people that hung themselves. There was one instance in one of these that a guy grabbed gasoline, set up his phone, poured gasoline over his head, and lit himself on fire on live stream. And I heard a little bit of audio from that, and basically it was people cheering him on and saying that, you know, it's very disturbing stuff that a lot of children, again, the children in these groups are between the ages of 8 and 17. They're a wide range age. Now, there is predators that also breed on these platforms that are made, because a lot of them are predators, a lot of them are pedophiles, a lot of them think that that's something that goes with the whole satanic thing. So there is older men that do go into these groups and ask for content that's explicit, and it's very, very telling of what environment is being bred. So this goes far beyond online. It's not just everything taking place online. They do swatting, bomb threats, physical violence. It's crazy. If you guys don't know what swatting is, it's where the group of people, they will call local authorities if they know where you're at, and they will say that you are a threat to national security. They will basically go and raid your house because a group of people said this. Very disturbing stuff. And also, I want to remind you guys, this is not just in the United States. This is everywhere. There was a 14-year-old Swedish boy that went on a stabbing spree. Basically, the first time it was like a 75-year-old man and he killed him. And then the second time it was an 80-year-old woman, and literally on camera film type stuff. He actually belonged to a subgroup of the 764 network, which was called No Lives Matter. And there's also another network that is kind of more or less another subgroup that's called CVLT. Crazy things. So I'm gonna go over a few things that I know I was going over them a little bit more there. Basically, the whole narrative for them is sextortion. That's how they start doing this, and they target not only vulnerable minors, but very young children, right? And they also exploit mental health issues, like I said, suicide, depression, things like that. Their teens are forced into self-harm, animal cruelty, even suicide live stream, all as digital currency or quote unquote lore books traded within the group. So basically, they trade their stories of making these children do certain things. There was one of a girl that killed her cat, and she had a picture holding up a name and the cat in her hand. It was astonishing. So a couple of the cases, so like I said, the CVLT cult, Caleb Merritt in 2021 was arrested for kidnapping and rape and leading of the crimes in that group. Angel Almeidas was arrested in Queens in regards to being a part of one of these groups. And again, the Swedish 14-year-old stabbing and other violent incidences. Now, that kid was, so in Sweden, he only spent the night in prison or in jail. Since he was under the age of 15, he only was liable to pay damages to the families, which I don't even know how much it was, but I was like, wait, what? And then also Tampa's Jack Rocker, he was sentenced in March of this year, and he was also linked to those groups. So an overview of April of 2025 arrest, leaders of 764 Inferno accused of pimping CSAM, grooming, orchestrating self-harm rituals, and accelerationist ideology. This is crazy. So this was in April. They basically took more people in and basically were able to find those digital quote unquote lore books. Just young girls were forced to fan sign again by fan signing is what they called it, cutting symbols into their bodies and proving it to them and sending them pictures and videos and of all of this. So, like I said, this is now a national security threat. The FBI counter-terrorist analyst views it's a 764 as a tier 1 terrorism threat, with 250 plus investigations, all 55 field offices activated. So basically what this means is everywhere the FBI is operating in, they are currently looking at people that are doing this. There's over 250 plus investigations that are currently under investigation for being in connection to this group, meaning that they are growing and they are still active as of today. Their goal is to accelerate social collapse by terrorizing youth. So that's what the goal of this group is they want to terrorize the youth so they can collapse, basically have a social collapse. Essentially what they're doing is breeding serial killers to do these horrific things, to film these horrific things. So many people and so many, especially children, get desensitized to it so much that it's a normal thing that's happening across not only social media, but also the media itself, as well as everyday life. Like going out to the park, you're gonna see somebody stabbing somebody. That's exactly what they want people to start believing. It's insanity, right? And to think that there's nothing in place that could have prevented this other than paying attention to your children and being good human beings and parents to your children. That's literally it. And we know in this society today, we don't have that. One of the main places that all of this ideology originated from was a thread called The Order of the Nine Angles. It was about Satanism, neo-Nazism, and basically the same thing as 764 Network is trying to do, accelerationism. So basically accelerating the social collapse of the world by influencing the youth to just be sociopaths. Pretty much. So one of the main things they use is the influence, and it's not born from textbooks. It's in horror, porn, and self-harm instructions and quote-unquote kill guides glorifying mass murder like Columbine. And this shows cross-pollination with offline extremist groups. Army veteran Densmore sentencing 30 years is a case in point. So there was an Army veteran that was sentenced for 30 years teenagers for doing this kind of extremism. So this is not something that's just online. It's also crossbred between offline extremist groups. So offline extremist groups that have maybe a member or two that are in these groups are saying, hey, they're over here doing this, we should start doing it too, you know? So it only takes one person to be like, yeah, let's go do it. So the biggest thing is in this, the FBI is basically warning to watch for warning signs with your children. Of course, always check their digital footprints that they're leaving, but watch for warning signs, secretive online behavior, not wanting you to look at things, unexplained injuries like cuts or burns, or even just simple bruises and things like that. And also sudden personality shifts. They don't want to go out, they don't want to talk to anyone. Of course, aside from the norm, because I also have a teenager and I watch him more closely than I think he even thinks. But it's important to know those things and to understand that this is not just happening by somebody text messaging your child. This is happening while they're playing Roblox, or while they're playing a video game, or while they're thinking that they're chatting with just another kid their age online. And in a lot of these instances, it's not even that they lie about their age. What I noticed a lot is it's not even the children that have like these known issues in life. It's kind of sad, honestly. Watch your children. That's literally what I have to say. Now, I want to talk about this young lady from Canada. Her name is Trinity. I will leave the Fifth the State CBS News is actually, this was like a special they did. And she said she was 14 years old at the time that she got sucked into this quote unquote cult. And she said it started with gore videos. She used to like gore videos, you know, like sometimes when you like watching horror movies, you know, those kind of gore videos and stuff. And it led to a Discord and a Telegram chat. She wrote in her diary about having to carve usernames into her body, and she would sit in her own filth and not eat or even leave her bed. So basically she talks about how this slowly spiraled into not gore videos, but it slowly spiraled into people basically acting like they cared about her, and so she felt like they were family. And so she slowly started, you know, like talking to people. She would get a boyfriend, or she would do something and they would praise her, and she thought that was something she needed. Her brain chemistry slowly altered into, oh my god, these are my people and I need to please them as much as possible. But it also led to her not taking care of herself because they told her not to. So she would sit in her filth. She would not take showers. She would not eat. It was very disturbing. Her mother started noticing this kind of stuff, and it wasn't until she met a user called MK Ultra. And basically MK Ultra was somebody that obsessed about her abuse that she had endured in her childhood, and was egging her on to basically kill her mother and her animals, which this was one of them that ended up killing one of her cats. Wanted her to kill her mother, and her mother had seen these messages, and she basically said that she was terrified. She would sleep with a knife, and it was just a huge issue. She said that she would try to take away devices from her, and she would yell and scream and throw a fit and pull out her hair and do just extreme stuff so she would still be able to talk to these people. It was very sad. I highly encourage you guys to go watch that. Trinity, this young girl, did try to kill herself on a live stream. She basically sat in a bathtub and was trying to hang herself under boiling water. So her mother was banging at the door that whole time. She did end up seeking help. However, the saddest part of this story is the RCMP, which is in Canada, that's what they run off of. That's kind of like their cops and their authority figures out there, I guess you can say. Even though Trinity had all of these markings on her body and obviously so much proof on her phone, they ended up returning the devices to Trinity and her mom and stated that they found no evidence. So they dismissed whatever they were trying to tell them, dismissed her word, dismissed her injuries, just because they could not get into some accounts. Now, the reason they couldn't get into some accounts was because Trinity and her mom were well aware that they were making her do other accounts, other logins, and things like that. And unfortunately, she didn't remember all that information. That's not something that she was able to remember, especially because she was going through so many traumatic events all at once. So, very sad about that. There's also another special from this same the Fifth Estate about Allie Broadway. She's a similar girl that went through stuff like this. Now, I do want to tell you that with Trinity, one of the men that I mentioned earlier, I want to say it was Angel Almeida, that was the MK Ultra username. So this is a national warning to parents across the world that this is something that is happening currently. This is something that needs to be addressed. This is something that the FBI can only do so much, because they have worked with Discord, they've worked with Telegram, they've worked with Snapchat, they've worked with all of the social media platforms these people are working off of. The way that people operate like this, they're well aware that they have to continue making other accounts, so they're going to find ways to do that. And there's ways around to do that, and to do that behind hidden walls that aren't going to show that it's you. So they're doing all they can and taking down what they can, but unfortunately it's not something that is happening fast enough, and unfortunately kids are dealing with this on a day-to-day basis. I want to make sure that this is clear. One of the main reasons that this is such a high contributing group and such a national security thing is the recruitment. So recruitment is basically done with blackmail, and kids either give up in saying that they encourage them to kill themselves, or they turn around and they become members of these groups recruiting other children. So essentially the people that they are blackmailing end up a part of their group and a part of the community that they have created within this as well. So it's very concerning, because again, these children don't even have their frontal lobe fully developed yet, and they're being manipulated and molded to think that all of this stuff is okay. It's crazy. They're basically grooming people to commit murder. Now, it has been reported that this group is working in over 24 countries, including the United States and Canada, and every day it seems like they're finding other things to take down or other people to find. There's numerous different articles about people that have been taken down. What I am going to probably start doing every other week from here on out is highlighting one of these young people that have spoken out, because I did notice not only was Trinity one of them, but like I said, the Allie Broadway, there's a few other people that have come forward to being in this group. And like I said, a lot of these people that are even being taken to jail, they are also victims. They started off as victims, but then this led on to something more, and I think that this can turn into something that we have beyond our control, because essentially these groups are breeding serial killers, people to kill other people, and it's going to become so desensitized to the rest of youth that they don't even need these groups to manipulate. So it's crazy. They are a vital threat and can kill and devour youth and rewrite reality. If something's off, open dialogue, report early, and connect with your community. But stay aware, guys. Please just stay aware. If you have children that play any kind of games, have access to the internet, check what they're doing. And even if it's on something that you think, oh, those are just kids, No, trust me, it might be a 45-year-old man that is trying to get something more. And it's very concerning. I think that the only thing that's going to help this is the vigilance of parents, or the vigilance of loved ones, of children, to stay vigilant in doing this. Because I'm telling you right now, if that doesn't happen, I know there's going to be a few that are going to go through, and of course everybody that's already already in these groups, but be aware and don't let anybody try to blur the lines in your vision to think differently about what could be happening. You never know. Somebody can be across the country. Like I said, this girl Trinity, she was in Canada. This dude was in Florida, or was he in Florida or like New York or something? You can see the reach. It's online, you know, they're desensitizing people or these children to this horrific ideology, and it's insane. So, and also just to clarify here, before I sign off here, this is, when I say neo-Nazi, I don't mean that this is like white supremacy. These people in these groups connect over their dark fantasies and dark things that they think should be out in the open instead of seeking help for it. They are every color, every ethnicity, and in every part of the country. So beware, check on your kids, and stay safe. We'll talk about it next time, guys.